I let my brother have my fiancée, and then I took his ex-wife. Here's the crazy story. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. I used to think rivalry was a childhood thing, something you pack away with your high school jerseys and your senior yearbook. My brother Liam and I weren't enemies. We were two magnetic poles that never settled. He beat me in sprints. I beat him on exams. He charmed rooms. I kept a job. Our parents called it iron sharpening iron. What they didn't say was that iron also throws sparks, and sparks can light the wrong fields on fire. I met Maya in a bookstore with soft lighting and a stubborn bell that rang a second too late. She reached for a paperback I had just put back, laughed when our hands bumped, and said, "I'm stealing your second thoughts." 3 months later, I was building a future like a careful mason. Budget spreadsheets, venue lists, tasting notes from a caterer who spoke in verbs. Glaze, torch, drizzle. Maya liked how I planned. She called me steady. I liked how she leaned on my shoulder and hummed. No song, just warmth shaped into sound. I proposed under a street lamp after dinner. Nothing flashy, one knee, a ring I could afford and was proud to give. She said yes with both hands over her mouth, and my chest felt like a porch light that finally switched on. Liam congratulated me with a grin that was a little too bright. "About time," he said, clapping me so hard my drink nearly spilled. He and Maya joked quickly, easily, two people fluent in banter, while I reclaimed the conversation with tales from work and honeymoon ideas. When I looked back, Maya and Liam were whispering over a bottle label, arguing if Notes of Leather was pretension or poetry. I filed it under harmless, the way you ignore a draft under a door you've already locked. Our families merged in planning. My mother looping ribbons through mason jars, Dad comparing DJ prices, Aunt Ruth promising to sew the hem on Maya's rehearsal dress. It felt like a slow, good snowfall. Every hour another layer of ordinary happiness. Yet small things nagged. Liam texted Maya about a playlist he promised to curate. Maya laughed at Liam's voice messages and turned the screen away when I walked in. "He's just helping," she said. "You hate playlists." I told myself trust means not tugging every loose thread. The night we toured our venue, a renovated greenhouse that smelled like rosemary and old stone, Maya stood between 2 rows of citrus trees and squeezed my hand. "We're really doing this," she whispered. "We're choosing quiet over chaos." I said, "We're choosing each other," and I meant it so deeply it felt like a vow already spoken. But there were glances I didn't know how to file. Liam's eyes lingering a second too long on Maya's laugh. Maya's way of relaxing around him like she'd untied a knot I didn't know she carried. On a Sunday dinner, my father asked Liam to open the wine, and the cork popped with a celebratory sound that made everyone cheer. Liam raised the bottle like a microphone and said, "To love choosing the braver path." Everyone clinked and smiled. I watched Maya watch him, and the smile that crossed her face made me feel like the toast wasn't about me at all. The first time I caught them alone, they were on the porch steps at twilight, knees nearly touching, arguing about a movie's ending. Maya looked up at me with an expression I couldn't place, guilty, relieved, cornered, amused. Then it was gone, replaced by the fiancé I recognized. "Join us," she said, and I did, placing myself between them like a traffic cone nobody asked for. I told myself that families blur and boundary lines are chalk, not paint. I told myself I was lucky, blessed, building something that would survive the weather. I told myself a lot of things because believing them kept the air warm. Even before the storm, the house knows where it will leak. The betrayal did not arrive with thunder. It arrived the way a room dims when a cloud covers the sun, a gradual hush, a temperature shift, a sense that something huge just moved overhead. It was a Tuesday, my least dramatic day, the one I save for laundry and invoices. Liam texted me, "Got time to talk?" Just us. The phrasing landed strangely. My stomach powdered to chalk. When I got to the bar he'd chosen, neutral ground, halfway between our apartments, he was already sitting in a booth, hands folded like he'd been practicing a confession. "Don't make a speech," I said, trying to grin. "You'll forget your lines." He swallowed. "Evan, this is going to sound impossible, and you can hate me, but it wouldn't be fair not to say it." "What?" I asked. "You finally admit I beat you at calculus?" "It's Maya," he said, and her name in his mouth sounded like a bruise being touched. I've tried to ignore it. I swear. But I can't. I'm in love with her. I didn't hear the rest. Sound became water. The bartender walked by with a tray of limes, and the green looked obscene, too alive. I tasted copper. My first thought was ridiculous and small, so that playlist wasn't just a playlist. My second thought had edges. Leave now. My third thought surprised me by being still and adult. Ask him if she knows. Does she know? I said, but it came out flat, not a question, just a sentence that wanted to end everything. He nodded, eyes glassy. She does. She feels things, too. It started with talking. You know how she is, curious about everything. It got complicated. We tried to put it back. We failed. I left him there with all his soft words and drove to Maya's. She opened the door with swollen eyes and a sweater I'd bought her for winter. Evan, she started, and I held up a hand. Don't make a speech, I said. I just need the truth. She stepped aside. We sat. The apartment smelled like oranges. She always zested them into tea like a grandmother who knew secrets about warmth. She tried to take my hand, then didn't. I love you, she said, and I love what we planned. But Liam, he's like a mirror I wasn't ready to look in. He sees parts of me I keep tidy for everyone else. With you, I'm safe. With him, I'm loud. I don't know how to be both. Then don't be both, I said, and I astonished myself with how calm I sounded. Be what you're choosing. My voice trembled only once on the last word. You're being generous, she whispered. No, I said. I'm being surgical. We canceled the venue 2 days later. I returned the tux deposit and deleted a folder named Our Life. People said admirable things about my maturity. I nodded like a widower who finds his wife's shoes still pointing toward the door. Liam tried apologies that sounded like weather reports. Sorrow in the east, honesty moving in from the west. Our mother cried without picking sides and set 3 places at dinner anyway. Dad called me to say, we can't control where the heart lands, like he was talking about a stray kite. Aunt Ruth didn't talk at all. She pressed a button into my palm and said, hold this when you want to throw something. In the last conversation I had with Maya before she moved her plants to Liam's place, she said, you always choose the high road, Evan. How do you do that? Habit, I said. Also, it's less crowded. I did not scream. I did not beg. I boxed her books without reading the inscriptions I'd written inside. I did not choose the revenge I could taste like salt. I opened the door, and I let them have each other. And yet the night after she left, I dreamed of wedding vows spoken in a greenhouse while rain clapped politely on glass. I woke to silence so loud it felt physical. Generosity is easy until it starts cutting into bone. Exile isn't always geographical. Sometimes you live at the same address and still feel banished. I learned how to cook for one the way you learn new handwriting after a broken wrist. Slow, ugly, stubborn. My phone was a museum of fragile objects I didn't touch. Photos, plans, reservation confirmations I hadn't yet canceled. I kept thinking grief would be one big wave. Instead, it was 10,000 small ones that soaked everything. People took sides with the quiet violence of seating charts. Friends who loved the story of Evan and Maya went dim in my phone. A couple of Liam's buddies texted me like I'd died. You're a good man. This will come back to you. My mother overfed me soup, as if salt and broth could mend ligaments the heart keeps tearing at night. Dad asked logistical questions he could solve. How's your lease? Do you need help with the deposits? As if anything could be deposited back where it belonged. On a Thursday when the sky looked bleached, I went to Aunt Ruth's because she never let silence congeal. She was mending a jacket when I arrived, needle flashing like a small lighthouse. Well, you look like a plant someone forgot in the car, she said. Sit. Tell me the worst parts. Skip the noble parts. So I did. I said the words I hadn't let out in the light yet. Humiliation. I wasn't enough. They were laughing when I walked in one time. I think it was about a typo in my text. I'm afraid this confirms something ugly I suspected about myself. She listened like it was her job, not flinching when my voice broke. People confuse drama with truth, she said finally. Liam is a trumpet. You're a cello. It was never a fair duet. I went home and tried to sleep. I kept waking at the time Maya used to shift in the bed beside me. I kept hearing Liam's voice telling a joke in a kitchen that wasn't mine. I put my phone in the freezer for an hour, a dumb ritual I invented to chill my impulse to text her. It helped in the way ice helps a fire you secretly want to keep watching. Work became my raft. I stayed late, took extra shifts, built spreadsheets so tight they felt like prayers. My boss complimented my focus, not understanding that a submerged person looks very still. I saved money because saving was something I could control. I stopped going to the neighborhood bar because it carried the shape of my last normal talk with Liam. I ran at night. I cooked too much pasta. I sorted the mail like it could deliver a different life. On the day their first Instagram photo went up, Maya is standing on Liam's balcony holding one of my old mugs. I turned my phone face down and studied the ceiling until it turned into a map that did not lead anywhere. Aunt Ruth called and said, "Want to drive until the highway runs out?" We did. We ate gas station peaches and invented fake backstories for other cars. For 2 hours, I was just a person in motion, not a person who'd been left. But exile stretches. It stretched through their engagement, which was small and bold at once, like writing your name with your non-dominant hand. I didn't go. I sent a card that said, "Wishing you all you've chosen." Liam texted a thank you with an emoji that made him look 12. Maya sent nothing. Then time did what it does. It stacked, it settled, it disguised. They got married at City Hall. My mother wore a dress the color of forgiveness. My father walked out to answer a call he didn't take. After the photos, people ate cake and pretended that was normal. I watched through a screen, alone, the way you watch fires you can't stop but also can't bear to see in person. Months later, a rumor found me at the grocery store, as rumors like to do, sneakily, beside the oranges. I overheard 2 women from our block whispering by the apples. Liam's new wife? She's already had enough. You didn't hear? Papers filed last week. Quick, messy. I stood very still, then bought food I didn't need. When the wave of humiliation finally retreated, it left behind something unexpected: space. Not peace. Not yet. But space where other possibilities could stand up and stretch. The first time I saw her, I didn't recognize who she was to me. Her name was Harper. I learned it later, after I'd already noticed her in the kind of way that feels like a choice disguised as an accident. We met at a hardware store. Of all places, she was deciding between 2 shades of stain, holding the sample boards like a moral dilemma, and I joked, "Always choose the one that sounds like a minor character," pointing to Chestnut Scholar instead of Autumn Cabin. She laughed the way people laugh when they know how to choose themselves again. We bumped into each other twice more in 1 week. A coffee shop where she ordered an Americano and apologized to the barista for existing, and the park where she talked to a skittish dog like he was an old friend late to the party. The second time, I said, "I'm Evan," because pretending I hadn't noticed her twice felt like lying. She said, "Harper," and the name sat in my chest like a small bird who knew where home was. It took me a week to realize she was that Harper, Liam's recently ex-wife. I saw her last name on a volunteer list at a community drive, and it split my thoughts like a seam ripper. I stood there, paper in hand, heartbeat getting ideas I hadn't given permission. Fate can be cruel or precise. Sometimes it's both on the same day. I told Aunt Ruth. She stared at me over her glasses and said, "Well, the universe has a dark sense of humor." I said I would stay away because it was clean, because I had standards, because I was not a man who hunted in the ashes of other people's fires. Aunt Ruth threaded a new needle and said, "Clean is not the same as honest." We crossed paths again at a neighborhood cleanup. She wore old jeans and an unflattering hat and made both look like decisions. We picked up winter-broken branches and filled compost bags. I said, "Is your stain a Chestnut Scholar?" She blinked, then laughed, and for the first time I saw the line of worry between her brows smooth out. "You seem familiar," she said later, over the hiss of a hot dog cart. "Have we?" "We've had adjacent disasters," I said before I could stop myself. She tilted her head. I watched recognition arrive piece by piece. "Liam's brother," she said quietly, like identifying a rare bird. I braced for a flinch, a retreat, a polite goodbye that would save us both from complications. Instead, she nodded, slow and sad, as if we were 2 veterans from the same lost battle. "I'm sorry," she said, "for all of it." We sat on a low wall, hot dogs and paper boats, and traded the outlines. No gore, no gossip, just the map of how things end when they never really began. She told me she had married Liam in a season when she believed speed was the same as certainty. He was noise, she said. I thought noise meant life. I was wrong. She asked how bad it had been for me with Maya. and I told her enough to be honest without turning every wound inside out. She listened with the clean attention of a person who wasn't auditioning for forgiveness. Days bled into texts, texts into coffee, coffee into a Sunday afternoon fixing a wobbly table she refused to throw away because flawed things still deserve legs. I admired the stubbornness. She admired that I owned with glue and patience. Our conversations had a spareness that felt like the opposite of a trap. I didn't feel the need to perform my goodness or explain my quiet. She didn't decorate her pain to make it palatable. We just placed it between us like two people agreeing to carry something heavy together, carefully. I knew the rules. I knew them as clearly as a stop sign. But grief had left holes where some of my rules used to live. And the hours I spent with Harper taught me a strange arithmetic. Two people with broken halves can still make something that isn't jagged. One evening, as we returned borrowed tools, she paused on her stoop and said, "You look like you're waiting for someone to tell you you're allowed to be happy. Are you that someone?" I asked, and my voice wasn't as steady as I wanted. She looked at me for a long time, a long, kind, dangerous time. "I could be," she said softly. We did not touch. We did not make promises. But the air had the charged quality of a summer storm that can't pretend it's just humidity anymore. The next day, Liam called me out of nowhere and said he needed to talk. I didn't invite him over. I met him in a public place because I didn't trust my house to stay standing. He chose a different bar this time, one with televisions tuned to a game neither of us cared about. He hugged me too hard, like we were boys again, and I let him do it because I was curious what it felt like to be the magnanimous one. It felt like wearing a coat that wasn't mine. "Harper's been weird," he said, apron of self-pity tied tight. "She's not answering my texts about the storage unit. Do you think she's seeing someone already? That would be so like her." "Like her," I said, and I heard the old heat wake up in my chest. "What is she like, Liam?" He frowned, missing the warning. "Impulsive, judgmental. She doesn't understand sacrifice. When I needed space to figure us out, she called it abandonment. Can you believe that?" He sipped his beer, then squinted at me. "You seem different. Less church mouse, more what, wolf?" "Maybe I stopped practicing the high road," I said. "Good," he said, leaning in. "Because, actually, I called for another reason. I keep thinking about you and Maya, and how I handled it. I was selfish, but I'm trying to fix things I can." He looked noble in the worst way, rehearsed humility. "I want to make amends." "Amends," I repeated, because sometimes you need to hear the word echo before you know if it fits the room. He nodded, smiling like a campaign poster. "If you ever need anything, money for that down payment you're always saving for, or introductions to people at work, I can help. We're family. We should build each other up." "You're offering me a referral as repentance," I said, and my laugh sounded like a snapped twig. He drew back. "What's funny? You are, Liam. You don't get to be the benefactor in a story you set on fire." He stared, probably adding this to a private ledger of times I'd disappointed him by not staying easy to handle. "You're angry," he said. "That's okay. I can take it." "Can you?" I asked. "Because there's something you should know." In every version I had rehearsed in my head, this was the moment I told him about Harper, and the bar turned into a courtroom, and we spoke lines we couldn't unsay. But the truth arrived differently, pulled by a gravity I didn't control. I thought about Harper's laugh when the dog bent his head into her palm. I thought about the way she had said my name once, carefully, as if it contained a fragile syllable she wanted to protect. "I ran into Harper," I said, choosing the smallest honest shape. "We've been helpful to each other." His eyes sharpened. "We're friends?" I added, and the word friends felt like a bridge built over a canyon in a single night. "Friends," he repeated slowly, as if testing a borrowed suit. "You and my ex-wife." "Your ex-wife?" I said, matching his emphasis deliberately. "Yes." He smiled, but it was the wrong smile. "If you're trying to hurt me, congratulations, choir boy. Did Harper tell you all my sins? Are you two rewriting history over tea?" I stood. I didn't throw the chair, didn't spill a drink, didn't become the man he liked to accuse me of being. "We're doing something you never learned," I said, voice steady. "We're letting truth be plain." He swore then, low and creative, and called Harper a name that made the room tilt. I leaned in until he had to look up. "Don't talk about her like that. Not where I can hear." He laughed without humor. "So protective. That's new." He drained his glass. "You think this ends well for you? For either of you? Do you think you know her? I know her, tells Evan. I married her. Maybe what you know is what you taught her to hide, I said. I left before he could answer, hands shaking, heart thudding like a door someone kept trying to open. Outside, the air was sharp, the kind that reminds your lungs they're built for surviving. I texted Harper. He knows we've talked. She replied, then let's stop pretending we didn't. I stood under a streetlight and realized I had crossed a line I could not uncross, not without erasing a part of myself that had finally woken up. 2 days later, my mother invited us all to dinner, and Harper asked if I wanted her there. I said yes before logic could argue, because hiding had started to look too much like the life I'd already lost. We walked in together, not touching, but already accused. Liam stood when he saw us and smiled like someone who'd finally decided on the shape of a war. Mom's dining room had always been Switzerland. Neutral linens, soft lighting. Everybody lays down arms at the door. That night it felt like a courtroom with casserole. Harper and I arrived together, not touching, the distance between our elbows saying, we know what this looks like, and we're still here. Mom looked relieved and terrified at once. Dad kissed Harper's cheek, as if remembering old manners could save new wars. Aunt Ruth squeezed my shoulder like she was checking a pulse. Liam stood up from his chair like a flag rising for battle. Nice of you to bring my ex as a +1. Ev, he said, cheerful in a way that made you check for exits. Harper met his eyes and didn't blink. She wore a plain sweater and courage. We're eating first, Mom said too brightly. Then talking. She started passing dishes in a choreography she'd rehearsed for 40 years. Potatoes, beans, little rolls shaped like the idea of comfort. We chewed. Forks clinked. The clock said nothing. It felt like being 10 again. Dad asking how school was while Liam shot me under-table looks that dared me to tell the truth. I reached for water, and my hand shook. Harper touched my wrist with exactly one finger, a brief press like a reminder to keep blood moving. Liam noticed and laughed softly, like an app notification. Text me when dessert starts, he said. I've got a speech for then. Mom's jaw clenched. No speeches, she said. Statements, perhaps. Gentle ones. We made it to coffee. Mom cleared her throat and began. Family is complicated, as if reading an ancient, worn script. Dad folded his napkin with unnecessary precision. I waited for the moment to announce the thing we had already said by walking in together. Liam tugged the tablecloth slightly, a child's old trick to see if the plates would slide. Harper, he said, you still iron your courage before you wear it? Liam, she replied. You still confuse performance with truth? His face flickered. Right, truth. Here's one. Evan's always wanted what I have. He wanted my teams, my rooms, my weather. Now he wants my history. He turned to me, smiling in the dangerous way he held knives in childhood, by the blade, just to prove he could. How does it feel to be me, little brother? Louder, isn't it? I set my cup down. I don't want your weather, Liam. I want a climate where I can breathe. Poetry, he said, rolling his eyes. But fine. Here's prose. You and she are wrong. You're wrong in ways that will make Christmas unfixable and Mom old. He looked at our mother, who had gone pale. Tell them, Mom. Mom inhaled like someone surfacing from dark water. I want everyone to be kind, she said. And honest. She looked at me. Evan, do you care about Harper? I do, I said. My voice surprised me with its steadiness. Care is the exact word. Liam clapped once, a single, rude sound. Then own it, he said. Say you're with her. Say it now so we can all adjust our faces. I looked at Harper. Her eyes were not pleading. They were open, and in them I saw a future that looked like work and sweetness and fewer stares. I'm with her, I said. We're taking this slow. But yes, I'm with her. The room tilted, the way rooms do when plates slide and nobody grabs fast enough, and then steadied around our new center of gravity. Dad nodded once, solemn, like I'd joined a profession. Aunt Ruth exhaled the word finally, as if she'd been holding it for days. Mom rubbed at the water ring under her glass, like she could edit the table into a different story. Liam smiled the way actors smile before the reveal. Since we're sharing, he said, I should tell you that Harper isn't only an ex-wife to me. She's also collateral on a debt. She left with more than the blender. She left with obligations. He turned to Harper. You want to mention the storage unit, or should I? Harper's lips thinned. You mean the unit filled with equipment you bought under a false name? Allegedly, he said lightly, and those old, dangerous syllables made my scalp prickle. Dad's chair scraped. What equipment? What name? Harper's gaze swept the table. He started a side business while we were married. Fast money. Promised investors a winter miracle. There's paperwork. Some signed by both of us because he tucked signature pages into the mortgage refi. I didn't notice until too late. She swallowed. I am disentangling. Mom gasped. It sounded like a glass breaking in another room. Liam smirked and spun the story in a voice meant for juries. She loved the lifestyle. Now she's sainting herself as victim. Classic Harper. What business? I asked, the careful calm returning like a switch I knew how to flip. He didn't answer. He lifted his cup and looked at his reflection in the black surface, as if he admired the version of himself available there. Stop fencing, Aunt Ruth said. Use nouns. Nouns cost, Liam said. And then, with the theatrical timing he'd always loved, he reached for the wine like a conductor about to cue chaos. Then Liam lifted the wine bottle like a gavel and smiled. The rest of the night tasted like pennies. Liam poured himself a glass he didn't need, the wine archetant, and began the soliloquy he promised. He called it context, but it wore the clothes of confession. He had hustles. He had investors. He was building opportunity funnels. He was using alternate vendor IDs to optimize tax load. He said words that don't belong at family tables. Escrow, burner, float, like he'd adopted a new dialect he wanted us to admire. Mom's hand shook so much the spoon chimed the cup. Dad asked for names. Liam provided initials like a magician showing you the wrong pocket. Harper cut through his fog. He forged my signature, she said evenly. On 2 vendor contracts and a purchase order. I have the originals. I have the emails. She looked at Mom. I wanted to tell you sooner, but I didn't want to set your house on fire. Liam laughed, showing all his teeth. She's creative, isn't she? This is what happens when people with small lives want big stories. They make them. You don't get to belittle survival, Aunt Ruth said. It's the largest story most people get. The room went quiet except for the tick of the old wall clock. I watched Liam's reflection tremble in his wine and thought of all the times I'd let him narrate me to myself. Not tonight. If there are documents, we'll review them, I said. If there are debts, you'll face them. If you forged anything, you'll fix it or fall with it. My voice sounded like Dad's voice when the car broke down. Factual, not cruel. Liam stood so fast his chair skittered. Oh, the choir boy grew a spine, he said. Look at you choosing someone else's ex-wife and her hurricane over your own blood. You think you're a hero in the comments section? He leaned over me. You always wanted to be me. Now you'll get the full package, fallout included. I stood too. We had been matched height since sophomore year. I don't want to be you, I said. I want to be done believing you. We stared at each other, 2 mirrors rejecting their assignment. He flinched first. Harper slid a folder from her bag and set it on the table with the quiet authority of a key. Here, she said. Photocopies. Originals are safe. Paper slid into Dad's hands, into Aunt Ruth's, into mine. The fonts were familiar, the same clumsy, bold Liam used for soccer flyers when we were 11. It looked like a child had dressed in a grown man's fraud. Mom whispered something that didn't resolve into language. Liam grabbed the folder, and for a second I thought he'd tear it up, but he only thumbed through, face going gray, realizing which lies had been printed, which stories lost the protection of air. He left without goodbyes, doors slamming like a cymbal crash. We sat in the ring of sound after him. Mom pressed her napkin to her mouth. Dad looked older in the soft dining light. Harper and I didn't touch. To do it then would have felt like a victory dance neither of us wanted. When I walked Harper to her car, the sky had the bruised color that comes before rain. Does he have a key to your place? I asked. I changed the locks, she said. But he's stubborn about access. He thinks doors are suggestions. I'll come by tomorrow and install a better deadbolt, I said, and this was love in my language. Tools, time, staying until the screws stopped squeaking. She smiled and then looked away. The way people do when accepting help is the more difficult bravery. Thank you, she said. And I'm sorry. I did not plan for my healing to collide with yours. We didn't collide, I said. We looked up and found we were walking the same road. She tilted her head like she was checking the forecast of my words against a sky only she could read. Then we should be honest about the weather, she whispered. We didn't kiss. We didn't promise next summer. We stood there, Two people discovered by a difficult truth that wouldn't let either of us pretend anymore. I went home and slept hard and ugly, jerking awake with the taste of copper again, that old betrayal flavor back like an aftershock. At 3 a.m., my phone lit. A photo pinged my phone. Harper's door, handle freshly scratched. The morning smelled like rain and panic. I was at Harper's building by 7, a toolbox in one hand and a thermos in the other, the two gifts I know how to give. The scratch on her door was a jagged, childish signature. I ran fingers over it and cataloged the damage the way my boss taught me to inventory risks: length, depth, direction. Petty intimidation has its own handwriting. Harper opened with hair in a knot and a wariness that made me want to build her a fortress from the inside out. "It could have been a bored kid," she said, offering a narrative small enough to swallow. "It could have," I agreed, "because hope is a muscle and we should exercise it even when it shakes." I replaced the strike plate with a reinforced one, installed a heavier deadbolt, and drilled a peephole at her eye level. She watched, handing me screws, making tea, giving me the domestic tasks that say stay without making it weird. When I finished, she leaned her forehead to the door for a second, as if listening to its new resolve. We sat. She showed me emails that were both banal and damning. Liam's smooth promises to investors, invoices with inconsistent addresses, the forged signatures, her terse breakup messages with a vendor who had started calling her at strange hours. "They didn't care if I was in or out," she said. "They just wanted the checks to clear." She opened a folder on her laptop labeled Winter Project, Bad. Inside sat spreadsheets labeled like prayers: what I owe, what he owes, what is real. I sent copies to a cloud folder and wrote down a timeline on paper, because paper is hard to hack. "We need counsel," I said. "A real one, not the near lawyer friends Liam likes to collect at bars." She nodded. "I have an appointment this afternoon," she said. "A woman who does fraud and family. 2 F words for the price of 1. Before I left for work, we stood in the doorway and watched the hallway like it might misbehave. "He'll escalate," she said. "He always does when an audience shrinks." "Then we shrink the stage," I said, and we shared a smile that had weight and usefulness. At my office, I tried to be a spreadsheet, but drama seeped under the door. At lunch, my boss called me in. "I got an anonymous email," she said carefully, swiveling her monitor. A message glowed, accusing me of data theft, with screenshots of innocuous pivot tables presented as smoking guns. "Do you have enemies, Evan?" "I have a brother," I said. Sometimes the words are interchangeable. She studied me, then the screenshots, then me again. She'd seen my work. She knew the flavor of my honesty. "I'll file this under nonsense," she said, "and I'll forward it to legal in case nonsense grows teeth. Go take a walk." Outside, the air had warmed into a sticky, indecisive afternoon. I phoned Liam. He didn't pick up. He texted instead, "Careful, F. Allies are a limited resource." I typed, erased, typed again, settled on. "Return the keys to the storage unit today." He replied with a photo of a key ring held between 2 fingers, the theater never resting. Harper's lawyer, O'Neill, sharp-eyed, braided hair like a crown that didn't need approval, listened to us lay out the mess. "I've seen worse," she said, which is the specific comfort of specialists. "But this is bad enough. We'll send a preservation letter today to your ex and his investors. We'll file to separate your liability. And if he touches your door again, we'll handle that too." On my way home, a new email landed with a bell sound that made my spine want to shrink. The sender was a law firm I recognized from soccer field banners. Polished, expensive, pleased with themselves. The subject line was not impressed with me either. The subject line read, "Subpoena, your brother versus Gray and Company." Legalese has a way of replacing your name with your stress level. The subpoena wanted documents, dates, the bones of my days laid out for inspection because Liam had named me as a material witness to his version of the truth. O'Neill called it a pressure tactic, part of what she termed his messy boy law strategy. She spoke calmly while I paced with a kind of holy fury I did not recognize as mine. "It's noise," she said. "We respond. We don't perform." Noise or not, it turned the volume up on everything. Dad forwarded a message from one of Liam's investors, a man with the permatan of charity galas, asking if the family intends to torpedo a promising enterprise. Mom cried into dishwater. Aunt Ruth baked something violent with nuts. then handed it to me and said, "This requires chewing. Chew before you speak to anyone today." That evening, Harper and I returned to the storage unit. We'd rented an adjacent one in my name, an unromantic romance of convenience, to move anything that had her name on it until the court ordered a formal division. The place smelled like dust and old adrenaline. Liam's unit overpromised with its GarageBand padlock and underdelivered with its contents. Boxes labeled in marker with the laziness of ambition, laptops, peripherals, office decor, cables, and an expensive-looking printer that still had the tape on its tray. I photographed everything, slow, methodical, the way you trace a wound to understand how it happened. In the back sat a plastic tote with a cracked lid and a sticker that said "Zmaz Lights," a lie so lazy it made me tired. Inside, wrapped in old t-shirts, were 2 phones, a router, a shoebox with prepaid cards, and a black ledger so on the nose I wanted to laugh. Liam had always lacked imagination when it mattered. I opened the ledger. Names, amounts, dates, arrows. It read like a song stuck on a chorus about borrowed money and disappearing promises. Harper exhaled the word "finally" in a tone that wasn't triumph, but relief's older cousin. We documented, sealed, moved the tote to my unit, and texted O'Neill. She replied with a single sentence that felt like a shield. "Good. Don't discuss with anyone else. Chain of custody matters now." Back at Harper's, we ate standing up, greasy slices and cold grapes, and watched a video someone had sent her without comment. A clip from a party 6 months ago, Liam toasting on a rented rooftop about winter returns, while a projector looped logos of fake partners across a brick wall. I paused the video on his face, searching for remorse on a time-stamped ghost. There was none, but in the reflection of the projector glass, another story played. Liam later that night counting envelopes, his grin cracked with hunger, a man half in love with the sound of his own danger. I didn't want to be the person who brought him down. I wanted to be the person who finally stepped out from under him. There is a difference, but it's the kind of difference you can only see when your hands stop shaking. At 2 in the morning, I heard a car in my driveway and froze. A shape moved past the curtains and then retreated. A minute later, my phone buzzed with a video from an unknown number. My front steps, my welcome mat, a slow pan up to my door. A caption appeared, "Open up, hero." I called the police, voice even, gave them the easiest facts, and they did the kind of patrols that mostly comfort neighbors. I slept on the couch with a hammer under the coffee table like I was building a personality from tools again. The next day, O'Neill filed the preservation letters and a motion to separate Harper's liability. I used the copier at work to duplicate the ledger for the folder marked "What is Real." After lunch, a cloud passed the sun and the office dimmed, and I had the absurd thought that weather keeps score. My boss stopped by my desk and said, "We stand by you. We're not interested in your brother's cinema." She handed me noise-canceling headphones and a pat on the shoulder that meant do the job you know how to do. That night, Harper texted, "I found something else in my drafts, an invoice for 12 demo laptops Liam claimed to ship to a partner school." We cross-checked the serial numbers against a public database. 11 were registered to private buyers a week later. One was returned to a pawn shop 2 blocks from Liam's gym. We stared at the screen like it could blush. We sent it all to O'Neill, who replied with the legal equivalent of sharp teeth. My body felt heavy with a new kind of tired, the tired of the right path that still requires uphill. In the party video's reflection, Liam counted cash with trembling hands. Exposure is not a single moment, it's a season. You plant the truth with paperwork and patience, water it with restraint, and wait for it to break the surface in a shape everyone can recognize. O'Neill warned us it would feel slow and then sudden. She was right. Weeks of filings and emails and polite letters saying "preserve this" explained that finally crescendoed into dates with names, hearings, interviews, a meeting with investors whose smiles had been a currency. Mom scheduled a family meeting as if that could domesticate the storm. "We will sit," she said, "and we will listen," as if verbs could save nouns. She invited Maya because Mom believes that at critical junctures, all players should be visible, like setting every game piece on the board to watch how they interact. I objected exactly once, then gave up. Some trains must be watched arrive before you can accept they can also depart. We met in the church basement because the dining room had lost its neutrality and the basement had coffee we didn't have to pretend tasted good. Folding chairs made us all the same height. Dad opened with a preamble about love that was honest and too late. Liam arrived late with sunglasses and a grin, as if the sun inside the room might scold him. Maya came in quietly, thin, eyes rimmed pink, the kind of beautiful you become when regret stops chasing vanity and chooses truth. "I'm not here to fight," Liam said, sitting with his legs wide, elbows colonizing the air. "I'm here to clarify." O'Neill, who had agreed to attend as a quiet presence, lifted one eyebrow. "By all means," she said. "Clarify." He started small, as always, with language he hoped would sound like responsibility without the inconvenience of it. He admitted to structural oversights, to delegation errors, to optimistic accounting. He did not say fraud. He almost said forgery and then chose misfiled signatures instead, a phrase that made Aunt Ruth's mouth shape a disbelieving ha. Harper set the ledger on the table and a copy of the invoice list. "Names," she said, tapping the columns with a pen. "Serial numbers. Bank transfers. Dates." Liam's jaw tightened. "Those are interpretations." "They're entries," I said. "Interpretations come later." He turned to Maya, seeking the echo that had always loved him. She surprised me by keeping her eyes on the table. "This is bad," she said softly. "Liam, this is not stormy art. This is crime dressed in weekend clothes." He opened his mouth to persuade her back to his side, and then shut it. The room heard that silence like a bell. Dad cleared his throat. "Son, did you forge Harper's signature on vendor contracts?" Liam's gaze flicked to mine, to Harper's, to O'Neill's legal neutral face, to Mom's trembling hands. "I copied a template," he said finally. "It was efficient." "Did you use Evan's address on a purchase order?" O'Neill asked mildly, sliding a printout across the table. My street stared back at me in bold font. His nostrils flared. "Everyone uses addresses," he said. "What is an address, anyway, if not a suggestion?" "It's a place where consequences get delivered," Aunt Ruth said. "Ask the mailman." The room went still, the way rooms do when the axis finally shifts. Liam's charm frayed at the edges. He looked smaller in the church light, like the version of a kid who once bragged about cheating on spelling and then cried when the teacher asked him to say the word responsibility aloud. He stood abruptly. "You're all performing sainthood because it's cheaper than forgiving me," he said, and there, briefly, was the truth he couldn't use. "You think you'll win because you've got paper. Paper isn't proof, it's paper. Paper gets stapled to proof," O'Neill said, still mild. "And then it becomes memory with teeth." Mom whispered something then, a new note in the old song. "I co-signed," she said, so quietly we all had to lean in. "For him. On a line of credit. He said it was for inventory. He said it was for the winter push. He said he'd be careful." She stared at her folded hands. "I wanted a version of my son to be true." Silence fell so heavy the fluorescent lights hummed louder to hold the air together. Liam looked at her with wildness, then at me like I'd somehow made this happen with my patience. Dad swore, a single syllable that sounded like a board breaking under weight. Aunt Ruth reached for Mom's hand, and Harper closed her eyes like praying without telling the prayer where to land. O'Neill lifted her folder. "We'll add this to our strategy," she said gently to Mom. "We'll protect you to the extent the law allows. And we'll move faster." Liam laughed, brittle. "Move fast," he said. "Let's see who trips." Mom whispered. "I co-signed everything." And the room stopped breathing. The words landed like broken glass across the floor. "I co-signed everything." For a moment, nobody moved, as though shifting might make the shards real. Mom kept staring at her hands, folded so tightly they looked like a knot. Dad leaned forward, his face flushed in a way I'd only seen once before, when he found out Liam had stolen money from his wallet as a teenager. But this wasn't a missing $20 bill. This was our family's roof, our parents' future, their dignity, all written onto Liam's ledger of lies. "Everything?" Dad asked, his voice lower than usual, rough with disbelief. Mom nodded once. "He said he needed my signature for the winter inventory loan. He told me the bank was strict with young entrepreneurs. I wanted to believe he'd finally found his lane. I didn't want to be the mother who never trusted her son." Her eyes lifted then, red and watery, and I thought if he had my name on it, he would never risk losing it. Liam's smirk was gone, replaced with the wild restlessness of a cornered fox. "It's not as bad as you're making it sound," he snapped. "It's cash flow. Everyone borrows against expectations." You forged Harper's signature, Dad shot back. You used Evan's address. Now your mother's credit is in this too? He slapped the printout O'Neill had provided. You've dragged us all into your circus. Circus makes money, Liam muttered, half under his breath. People pay to watch. The sound of Aunt Ruth's palm slamming the table startled everyone. This isn't a circus, she said sharply. This is a fire, and you've handed your own mother the matches. For once, Liam didn't have a comeback ready. He looked at Mom, perhaps expecting rescue, but she didn't move toward him. Instead, she whispered, You made me complicit. Do you know how that feels, Liam? To be 58 years old and realize your child has written you into fraud? Harper shifted in her chair, her voice calm but fierce. This is exactly why I left you. You use love as collateral, then call the debt a misunderstanding. You told me once that family was just leverage that doesn't expire. I should have known then. Liam snapped his gaze to her, fury flashing. And now you're crawling to my brother? Of all people. He turned to me, his voice rising. You think you've won something, Evan? She's only with you to spite me. I stood, finally letting the anger sharpen instead of dull. No, Liam. She's with me because I don't treat people like pawns in a game I can't even win. She's with me because when she looks at me, she doesn't see leverage. She sees a partner. He laughed bitterly. Partner? You don't have the stomach for real risk. You've always been the safe one. The boring one. That's why Maya chose me. That's why you'll lose her too, eventually. Maya, silent until now, flinched. Then she spoke, her voice small but clear. You're wrong, Liam. I didn't choose you because Evan was boring. I chose you because I thought chaos was passion. I thought recklessness meant love. And now, I see it was selfishness. Her eyes glistened as she turned toward me. I'm sorry, Evan. You deserved better. I didn't answer her. Some apologies arrive like letters years late, acknowledged, but no longer deliverable. O'Neill gathered the papers with brisk precision. This changes our posture, she said. Mrs. Gray, we'll need to isolate your liability immediately. If Liam attempts to use your co-signature to shield himself, we'll be ready. The good news, she tapped the ledger Harper had preserved, is that we now have more direct evidence than most cases ever start with. Good news. Dad repeated, incredulous. My wife's signature is tied to his lies, and you call that good news? I call it leverage, O'Neill replied smoothly. But this time, in your favor. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the only sound while Liam stood with his fists flexing uselessly at his sides. He looked around the table, at Mom's devastated face, Dad's fury, Aunt Ruth's steady glare, Harper's cold resolve, Maya's regret, and my unflinching stare. For the first time, I saw it land on him. The truth that his charm couldn't paper over this, that the audience had stopped clapping. He grabbed his jacket and spat the words like venom. You'll regret this. All of you. Then he stormed out, the echo of his footsteps fading up the church stairs until the door above slammed shut. We sat in the silence he left, each of us realizing in different ways that nothing about our family would ever return to the version we'd once rehearsed. And in that silence, Mom finally whispered the question that cut deeper than any accusation. What if I can't forgive my own son? Her words hung in the basement air like smoke no fan could clear. What if I can't forgive my own son? Mom had never said anything like that before. She was the one who stitched birthdays back together, who baked pies after funerals, who forced apologies with the stubborn faith that love could still be salvaged. To hear her doubt forgiveness itself, it was as if the foundation of our house had cracked, and everyone felt the shift beneath their feet. Dad's hand hovered above hers, but didn't land. His face looked older than it had the night before, as if years had rushed to claim him all at once. Helen, he said gently, forgiveness isn't a requirement. Not when it becomes permission. Aunt Ruth nodded, knitting needles clinking in her lap like punctuation. Forgive when you can. Protect yourself when you can't. They're different muscles. Mom shook her head. I raised him to believe family was safety. I said it so often he threw it back at me. Now I feel like I built the rope he's using to strangle us. She looked at me, eyes pleading. Tell me, Evan, am I wrong to love him still? I swallowed. There are no clean answers in families, only layers. No, I said. You're wrong if you let that love blind you. Loving him doesn't mean covering for him. It means refusing to let him drag you down with him. Harper reached across the table then, placing her hand softly over Mom's. You can love someone and still lock the door, she whispered. Mom's tears spilled at that, but she didn't move her hand away. Maya dabbed her eyes too, though for whom she wept, I couldn't tell. O'Neill straightened her folder, her voice calm but cutting. This family has a decision. Either stand united in the truth, or let Liam fracture you further. If you stay divided, he wins. If you hold to evidence, you survive. Dad finally spoke with steel. Then we choose survival. We've covered for him long enough. For the first time, I felt Harper's gaze on me like a tether pulling me steady. We'd both been burned by Liam's recklessness, but in that room, with the ledger on the table and my mother's sobs in the air, it was clear our survival had become a joint act. Later, after the chairs were folded and the coffee had cooled, Harper walked me to my car. The parking lot was empty, the sodium lights buzzing like a tired choir. You were strong in there, she said. I felt like I was breaking, I admitted. Strength usually looks like breaking in slow motion, she answered, her breath fogging in the chill. I looked at her, at the woman who had once been Liam's partner in chaos and was now my partner in endurance. Do you regret this? I asked. She shook her head slowly. Regret him, yes. Regret surviving him? Never. Then, softer, regret us? Not even close. For the first time in months, I let myself smile without irony. But before I could answer, headlights swept the lot. A black car idled at the far edge, engine growling low, window cracked just enough for a hand to flick a cigarette ember into the dark. Harper stiffened. It's him, she whispered. And as the engine roared and the car peeled out, tires spitting gravel, I realized Liam hadn't just left our family behind. He'd declared a new kind of war. The next battle was coming, and it wouldn't be fought at a dinner table. The car's taillights bled into the dark, leaving behind only the acrid scent of burned rubber. Harper gripped my arm so tightly her nails left half-moons. I steadied her, though my own chest rattled with adrenaline. Liam wasn't just sulking now. He was circling, waiting for an opening. We didn't speak until we were back inside her apartment, double lock engaged, curtains drawn. She set down her mug of untouched tea, fingers trembling. He won't stop, she said. Every time I think he's burned through his fuel, he finds more. I took her hands. Then we don't wait for him to run out. We cut the supply. The next morning, O'Neill filed an emergency order. Restraining contact, expedited review of the ledger, subpoenas for Liam's investors. The law, she reminded us, is slow but relentless. Think of it as stone rolling downhill, she said. Once it starts, it doesn't stop until it flattens everything in its path. Meanwhile, Liam escalated his theater. Anonymous texts flooded my phone. Traitor, thief, pretender. Harper received voicemails of silence. Heavy breathing stretched across minutes. Mom found a package on her porch. Inside, only a single poker chip, scratched across the middle. She nearly fainted. Dad wanted to call the police again, but O'Neill advised patience. Every stunt adds to our case. At work, my boss pulled me aside. He emailed again, she said, showing me a new barrage of accusations, claims that I'd funneled data to foreign clients, each more absurd than the last. Our legal is archiving it. You just keep doing your job. She hesitated. But I have to ask, how far will your brother go? I didn't answer, because the truth was ugly. Liam's limits were elastic, stretched by desperation and ego. That weekend, Harper and I decided to take a drive, just to breathe air he hadn't poisoned yet. We ended up by the river, the water swollen from recent rains, carrying branches and bottles downstream. We sat on the hood of my car, listening. You ever think about leaving? She asked suddenly. Leaving where? Everywhere. Just starting over. No family, no lawsuits, no history. She looked at me, her hair pulled wild by the wind. Sometimes I wonder if survival means escape. I thought about it, the fantasy of vanishing, of becoming someone whose brother wasn't a storm cloud trailing sparks. But then I shook my head. If we run, Liam wins twice. First for what he did, and second for making us disappear. She studied me, then nodded. So we stay, even if it means dragging truth through the mud until it shines. When we got back to town, my phone lit with a message from an unknown number, a photo of Harper and me at the river, her head resting on my shoulder. The caption read, "Cute. Let's see what the investors think." Harper froze when she saw it. "He's watching us," she whispered. I stared at the image, fury building slow and deliberate, like a storm assembling on the horizon. Then it's time, I said. No more waiting. We expose everything. Publicly. Harper touched my sleeve. Are you sure? Once it's out, it can't be pulled back. I'm sure, I said. Liam wanted an audience. Let's give him one. The next morning, we gathered in O'Neill's office, the ledger open, the contracts spread across the desk, Harper's laptop glowing with evidence. And while she assembled the legal filings, I drafted something else, a statement, plain and brutal, with dates and names and numbers. A statement that, once posted, would tear the mask off Liam for everyone to see. But even as I typed, my phone vibrated with one more message from him, short, sharp, and chilling. If you go public, I go nuclear. The text glared at me. If you go public, I go nuclear. No emojis, no smirks, just threat distilled. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure if answering would be fuel or shield. Harper leaned over, read it, and whispered, he's bluffing. But I knew Liam too well. He didn't bluff, he escalated. O'Neill examined the message, calm as always. Classic intimidation, she said, tapping her pen. Legally useful. But you should prepare yourselves. If he says nuclear, he probably means personal. She was right. The first explosion landed that evening. A blast of posts on social media, dozens of burner accounts sharing doctored screenshots of bank statements with my name, implying I'd siphoned money from Harper during her marriage. Tags to my employer, comments under my mother's church page. Whispers sent like spores through every corner of our community. By midnight, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Old friends asking questions. Colleagues forwarding evidence they didn't believe but couldn't ignore. My own stomach clenched, not because I thought anyone who truly knew me would buy it, but because Liam understood the damage wasn't truth, it was doubt. At 2 a.m, Harper found me at my desk, hunched over, deleting, reporting, counterposting. She touched my shoulder. You can't win by mopping up his poison. He'll always spill faster than we can clean. Then what? I asked, voice raw. We get louder with the real story. We don't hide anymore. So at dawn, we pressed post. Not just me, Harper, too. Screenshots of forged contracts, the ledger pages, the pawn shop invoice, the lawyers filing receipts. A clear timeline, dates, amounts, signatures, everything we could verify. I ended the post with one sentence. My brother wants an audience. I want the truth heard louder than his lies. It spread faster than I expected. Family friends shared it. Neighbors added their own stories. Even one of Liam's investors commented, "This matches what we suspected." The tide turned, not with noise, but with weight. Real, documented weight. By noon, Liam's accounts were silent. Too silent. That worried me more than his insults ever had. Mom called, her voice trembling. People are asking if it's true. It is, I said. Every line. You know it. She was quiet. Then, I know. And I hate that I know. That evening, as Harper and I sat in her apartment, exhausted from watching notifications scroll like ticker tape, a knock rattled the door. Not polite, not tentative. Heavy, deliberate. I froze. Harper whispered, "Don't." But I was already moving. Through the peephole, a familiar silhouette leaned too close. Liam. Eyes wild, hair unkempt, fists balled. He pounded again, the door vibrating. "Evan," he barked. "Open up. You want to do this in public? Let's finish it in private." Harper grabbed my arm. "Don't open it." But Liam slammed again, voice echoing down the hall, words sharp enough for the neighbors to hear. "You think you've exposed me? You haven't seen exposed yet." And then, with a sudden crack, the wood around the lock splintered. The doorframe groaned as Liam shoved his weight into it, and I realized this wasn't a performance anymore. He was ready to break all the way in. The sound of splintering wood is primal. It tells you safety has already been breached. Harper yanked me back from the door as Liam's shoulder drove into it again. The reinforced deadbolt I'd installed screeched, but held, buying us seconds, not safety. "Call the police," I told her, my voice low but steady. She dialed with shaking hands while I grabbed the hammer I'd left under her side table. For months, Liam had been noise, shadows, empty threats. Now he was a body trying to crash through, and my chest filled with something sharp. Not fear, but clarity. "Evan," he shouted. "You ruined me. You stole her. You stole my life. Open this door and face me like a man." His voice cracked into something raw, the polish gone. I stepped closer, hammer tight in my grip, and shouted back through the door. This isn't your life anymore, Liam. You torched it yourself. Another slam. The frame groaned. Harper's voice trembled into the phone. Yes, he's here. He's breaking in. Please hurry. We heard footsteps in the hall, neighbors opening doors, gasps, someone yelling, "Stop it!" But Liam only roared louder, slamming until sweat darkened his shirt. His rage was naked now, no charm to disguise it, just the wild desperation of a man who knew the walls were finally closing in. Then, sirens. Quick, rising, cutting through the chaos. Blue lights splashed across the hallway window as the pounding on the door stuttered. Liam cursed, one last furious blow against the wood, and then the sound of retreat, boots thudding down the hall, a stairwell door banging open. Police voices echoed seconds later, commands, radio chatter, neighbors spilling their versions of the story. Harper and I opened the door carefully, the frame cracked but standing. My hammer dangled useless at my side. An officer took our statements, eyes narrowing at the texts, the photos, the ledger copies we handed over. You've got more than enough, he said. Tonight's the line. Restraining orders will be immediate. Charges will stick. When they left, Harper sank into a chair, head in her hands. I crouched beside her. It's over, I whispered, though my voice shook. She looked up, eyes blazing through her tears. No, Evan. It's just beginning. He's going to court, your mother's tied to the debt, the whole family's fractured. We survived tonight, but surviving the aftermath will be harder. I sat back, exhaustion flooding every nerve. She was right. Exposure wasn't the end. It was the doorway into a storm we still had to walk through. Yet as I looked at Harper, her resilience, her steadying presence, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever storm came, I wouldn't be walking through it alone. Because sometimes survival isn't about forgiveness or even justice. Sometimes survival is simply choosing the person who refuses to let go of your hand when the walls shake. And that night, as the blue lights faded and the silence returned, I realized I had already made that choice.